G'day, you noble knights and you peasants out there. It is Coach here. I hope you're all doing well. It is Halloween, so if the door knocks and the dog barks, you know kids are trick-or-treating, but it is no grand delusion here. I am here with Will Hayes, who's going to be talking to me a little bit about Flesh Eater Courts and how they are going in 3rd edition, because I haven't seen a lot of them on the table. I saw Will. I've been watching Will very closely in the American circuit. So he's joining us at 4 o'clock in the morning for this mad lad. He's probably thinking it's like a beach holiday in his grand court. But you've been doing pretty well, man. I've been watching you on the tournament scene, and you've been doing well with an army that not a lot of people are talking about. So I'm going to pick your brains. But before we get into that, g'day, welcome. Let the people know who you are and do your intro.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. So I'm Will Hayes. I'm from Maine, which is in America. Been playing Flesh Eater Courts since early 2.0, pretty much when the Codex dropped in 2019. I was pretty heavily into Bretonnia in fantasy. I had a Bretonnian army for Sigmar when Sigmar first dropped. So I was really, it was unfortunate when they moved that to Legends. So I was looking for another avenue to kind of play that theme of the courtly, the noble knights, and then led me right into Flesh Eater Courts. So I picked that up in 2.0, went to a bunch of events with them, but trying to been refining my list since then. Towards the end of 2.0, they were doing in a pretty good spot. They had some tough matchups. Gargans didn't help. Archeon didn't help at all. But I think they're in a decent spot in 3.0. They definitely have some opportunities, but we're still trying to feel that out right now.
And big love to 3D6 Wargaming, which is obviously your games club. You got lots of representation there. You make some really good points, even just to kick things off. Like when because I've been in lockdown. I'm out of lockdown now. Happy days, great success. But I was living vicariously through America and England. Looking at the tournament scene and all countries. Like Poland's had some awesome events. A lot of these countries are having events, and I'm not seeing a lot of Flesh Eater Courts in those top 10s. You're a 3 and 2, 2 and 3 kind of average army. And I don't know if people just aren't running them, because I'm not seeing a lot of people actually running Flesh Eater Courts. And they've gone through a lot of changes. Like, Will, you and I were talking before we went live. Flesh Eater Courts is in a really interesting spot because, let's take a look at this, right? So if you run a lot of ghouls, you lost Ghoul Patrol, which was a battalion that was staple for ghouls. You don't have a lot of rend. You don't have a lot of mortal wounds. You have a lot of speed, but the board has shrunk. Like it's interesting. So because I'm like, where do Flesh Eater Courts kind of sit?
So I think it's really interesting actually in 3.0. I think there's a lot more. I think of Flesh Eater Courts in 3.0 as a scalpel. So you mentioned the mortal wounds. I think mortal wounds is so important because this army doesn't have a lot of rends. Most of your attacks are rend 0. Some of them are rend 1. Very, very few rend higher than 1 in this army. But you do have some mortal wounds. So you have flayers, which still do the mortal wounds on a 6 to hit. They have 4 attacks each. So there's some mortal wound output there. You also, of course, have the Terrorgeist. They have their gruesome bite, or their Deathly Maw, right, which is the flat 6 mortal wounds on unmodified roll 6 to hit. The other place that you have mortal wounds, and this is where I was trying to go towards the tail end a second, is you have their screams. So the only range attacks that Flesh Eater Courts have is either breath attacks from a zombie dragon or screams from the Terrorgeists and Flayers. And those screams are bravery-based attacks. So, for example, on the Terrorgeist, it has a range of, I think, 10. Basically, you take the enemy's bravery. If you're at full life, you roll a d6, add 6 to it. The difference between that roll and the enemy's bravery is the number of mortal wounds they take at range. Flayers have a similar attack, but if you're outside of 3 inches, it's -2 to that roll. So there's a lot of play with ranged mortal wounds, especially against low bravery armies.
And unfortunately, like how many high bravery armies are we currently? Chaos is running right. Riot. There's a lot of death running around with Soul Blight and OBR. So that was always like one of my challenges, because I love Flayers. And I don't want to get into the weeds too much just yet, but I thought I wanted to set the scene with Flesh Eater Courts, because not a lot of people are running them, and I don't think it's that they're a bad army. Like when I think about who's doing poorly in Age of Sigmar, Flesh Eater Courts isn't one of those armies. I think of Gits. Gits is a perfect example. You know, you are at the bottom of the rung. And I think maybe it's just that we haven't got a lot of Flesh Eater Courts players, and we're all kind of working out the right way to build a Flesh Eater Courts list for 3.0 because the game has changed. There's the safe stacking. There's the less objectives. You've lost some of the key battalions that, Dead Watch and Ghoul Patrol and some of the ones that were staple to your list. And I think maybe we're still kind of working it all out. So that's kind of where I wanted to like pick your brains.
Yeah, so I think in 3.0, 3.0 more than ever is all about playing to your battle tactics and playing to the mission. And I think Flesh Eater Courts has an opportunity to do that really well because they do have high movement. They have, most of their army can fly, or you can give most of your army fly. So they do have ways to work around your opponent's models. Again, it's not just about killing in 3.0, it's about achieving your battle tactics. So when you build a list, you want to build a list that can achieve those battle tactics consistently and still fight on the points that you need to fight on.
Love it. So before we get into those weeds of third edition, what have you noticed jumping from 2 to 3? Because some people might be picking things up for the first time, or
Yep.
they're still kind of feeling it around. Like, what did you find, and how did you, whether you're building lists or things that you did a lot really well in the old edition is no longer working for you, or even the other way around, things that you didn't look at in second edition have now become like a hot commodity?
Yeah, so I think that the big change for Flesh Eater Courts going from second to third is obviously we lost the ability to use our feeding frenzy more than once. In second edition, if you had the available command points, you could select multiple units to give feeding frenzy. And that, again, feeding frenzy is that ability that immediately after you attack, pile in and attack again. Now you're limited to only doing it once per combat phase. So that means you have to be very, very strategic about what unit you're going to do that with.
So has that impacted like the Grizzlegore kind of build? Because
I,
that used to often be you'd run 2, 3, 4 Terrorgeists and you would just try to maximize the double pile-in or the pile-in after death.
Yeah, so I think that there's still play with that list because it's just obviously we're in Gur, right? So monsters are a big deal. But yeah, it basically for having all of your army engaged and then doing the pile-in attack twice for multiple units. So we've lost some of our damage ability there.
Can you just repeat what you just said? I think your mic cut out for a brief second. I was like, you're good now.
Okay, so yeah, so we lost the damage potential of being able to pile in and attack twice on multiple units, which kind of hurt that Grizzlegore list a little bit because we're capping the amount of damage we can do per turn. But that also encourages us not to have our whole army engaged at once. You want to engage with key pieces on objectives to trade.
Yeah, no, I dig it. I dig it. And I think you're right. People look at this game as like a damage dealing game. It's not about doing damage. It's about movement. It is about objective scoring. And
Yep.
now more than ever, it's about battle tactics. You will, in a lot of situations, you will do better if you score your battle tactic than scoring your objectives, because
Right.
objectives now are capped, right? You can only get usually 1, 2, or more in the
Yep.
average scenario.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to make sure you're able to get those battle tactics each turn. And then I think another thing that actually helped Flesh Eater Courts, I feel like, so losing battalions obviously hurt. But what you gain access to, you were paying all these points for a battalion in 2.0, and you basically had to take a battalion to be competitive. Now you are able to take those core battalions for free. So you're basically gaining back between 100 and 150 points to your list. Points went up a little bit, but not to be impactful. So you're actually gaining more models in 3.0 than you were in 2.0.
And I'm going to bring up one of Will's lists, within the session. We'll talk a bit more about it, and kind of wrap this all up. But I'm just looking at your list now. And when I look at the price of, say, the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist,
Yep.
I'm looking at the Ghouls and the Flayers. You're right. Like when I look at the price comparison, Flesh Eater Courts didn't get hit nearly as hard as other armies. So you saved a bunch of points, whether it was from Feast, from Dead Watch, or
Yep.
Ghoul Patrol, or all the other ones. I remember there was like a horrors version, and
Yep.
you're probably getting a bit more from your buck. And I love the fact that you've got the ability to go one drop if you want to. I think that was kind of like dictating terms was quite hard for
Yeah.
spec.
in 2.0, you won that battalion so you could get your drops as low as possible. Flesh Eater Courts is an army that wants to be able to decide whether to go first or second. You're shooting for that double turn because that double turn is so impactful. Well, with any combat army, you want to be shooting for that double turn. And now you're going to get it for free with one of the core battalions.
Yeah, no, I like it. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's cool, right? Because if you want to go down, let's say a Grizzle Gore build and you want to have multiple Terrorgeists that don't have a hero on it, you've got the Alpha Beast pack.
Right.
You know, if you want to have some really cool screens and, you know, you want to protect those flayers or those horrors before they get into combat, you can chuck them into a Hunters of the Heartland, or, you know, you need those extra command abilities, or you want to get an extra spell for your Arch region, boom, get yourself a Hunters. You know, there's a lot of cool flexibility in this list, and you've got enough commanders, sub-commanders, troops. You can build whatever you want to build. I think you're in a really good spot, except for Grizzlegore. I think if you want to go Grizzlegore, the drops is going to be hard using battalions.
Yep, Grizzlegore is tough, and the other thing that's tough for Flesh Eater Courts is you really want those mounted heroes. So the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist, Ghoul King on Zombie Dragon, only one of those will fit in that core battalion.
Other than like, you know, just some very high level stuff, you know, so we had the board change, right? We've got extra command abilities, things like rally, redeploy, unleash. Well, actually, I was going to say unleash hell might not be that great, but then I actually thought about it. Wait a second, you know, flayers, if they get charged, would that could be quite a deadly unleash hell when I think about it. I think I might have lost Will. Or maybe I've lost. Yep. Am I still going? Will's dropped off. Sorry. I was looking at, like, when I'm thinking about, you know, Flesh Eater Courts, that was really weird. I didn't know if it was me or if it was Will. Will's just booting back up. Like, when I was thinking about Unleash Hell, that would be really cool. And I'll bring up his list, actually. I might as well bring it up and just kind of give you a bit of a sneak peek. But Will has, he's actually been playing around a little bit with Mega Gargans, which is really cool. But in this particular list that we'll go through a bit later, he's running two Ghoul Kings on Terrorgeist. He's running an Arch Region. He's running the Flayer. Sorry, he's running 3 units of Crypt Flayers, a unit of 20. So he's reinforced the Crypt Ghouls. He's got himself the Battle Regiment. So he's gone down to 2 drops. So that'll be everything except for one of the Terrorgeists. So he'll have, you know, I guess he'll have a bit of flex there. And then he's also got himself a Crypt Courtier as well as the Arch Region as well. So he's got some really interesting choices. And I love the fact that he's tapped into the Flayers for the extra movement, and obviously the Ghouls for a bit of screens. Although, as I mentioned, you could go Warlords and Hunters for this one. That would quite work. But when I think about Flesh Eater Courts right now, I think, you know, one of the things that I want to find out with Will is that they don't have a lot of mortal wounds. And I know he said, you know, the bite from the Terrorgeist, or the fanged maws from the Terrorgeist, and he's got the screams. But we are in a very heavy armor save meta right now, where you're playing against 2-up or 3-up armor saves, and you're playing with Flesh Eater Courts with a high volume of attacks. And when you're going up against like armored save of 2 or armor save of 3, those high volume of attacks, and then you've got a ward save potentially like an Amulet of Destiny or a Mystical or some type of armor save, it can be quite a struggle without those mortal wounds, which is why people are building so many mortal wounds into their list. Or they're going like the Nurgle type of route, which is just a lot of like heavy durability with their saves. So I'm very, very curious to see where Will kind of goes with this. But I think for me, that's probably one big thing I want to work out. Like, how is he actually building around this list? Where does he stand with the Grand Courts? Because when I look at the Grand Courts, one of the challenges you're going to have is that all of them, except for like the unmounted feast day like this, have got yourself a command trait, you've got yourself the command ability and the artifact already locked. So if you want to go down the 1-drop route or the low drop route, it's really difficult. You've got to stick to that one particular artifact. But if you go into and forget the drops, get yourself Warlord, get yourself Commanding Entourage, get that extra artifact, get that Amulet of Destiny, find yourself that arcane tome or whatever it might be. And all of a sudden, you've got those high drops. And then, you really want to go first, as Will's already said. You want to make that choice of if you go first or if you go second. So, for me, I'm really curious about Feck. And yeah, he's Will. I think he's back. He's back with no audio. Love technology. We lost your mic. You might need to fix up your settings again. There he is. Here he is.
Let's see here.
No, you're good now. You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
Yep.
Welcome
Lost
back.
power. We're in Maine. Big storm outside right now. Nor'easter.
All right. So I was just talking a bit about your list and a little bit of like just some curiosities, but I think Feck overall interesting. A lot of challenges in the meta. How are you responding to armor save? I think stacking is probably the first one I'm really curious about.
Yep. So that's challenging. Again, Flesh Eater Courts have some damage potential. I think how I've been dealing with the armor save stacking is just really lean heavily on my mortal wound output. That's why the Terrorgeists are so important. So the other thing that Flesh Eater Courts have, in addition to have that critical ability to be able to pile in and attack again immediately. So on your big monsters, that's super critical. Again, the bite attack on the Terrorgeists give flat 6 mortal wounds on unmodified rolls of 6s to hit. So the play there is you have a Born Archregent can give that model plus D3 attacks if it gets its spell off. So for example, I ran a bunch of Terrorgeists yesterday at an RTT, and in one round of combat, I had 6 attacks with a bite. I rolled 4 6s, so rolled really hot. But basically, I just deleted something because it's 24 mortal wounds. So you got your mortal wound output on your melee attacks. Also, the Flayer's got some mortal wound output on unmodified rolls of 6s to hit. The other output you got is obviously with the screams against low bravery armies. And there's some plays that you can do to modify bravery. So you mentioned, there's a lot of armies with bravery 10. There's an artifact you can take that can reduce that by 2. There's another artifact you can put on a smaller healer to reduce that by 1. But there's a bunch of different stacking things that you can do to really get around those armor saves. So to answer your question, it's not great. We don't have a whole lot of rends. I've picked units to avoid. So horrors and ghouls don't have any rend at all, and that's a really tough spot to be in, especially with melee units in 3.0. So I've been trying to lean heavily on the mortal wound output.
So you're probably saying to me, in your current thinking, less reliant on your Crypt Ghouls,
Yep.
more reliant on things that can deal mortal wounds. Do you think horrors, because horrors
don't have any rends?
No, but they have high amount of attacks.
They have a same. They have 3 attacks, no rends. I can just pull up their war scroll here. What they do have going for them is higher damage. Unfortunately, because of the no rend, they're in a pretty tough spot. They are cheap, which is good. Yes, they have 3 attacks, 4s to hit, 3s to wounds, no rends, 2 damage per attack. Unmodified rolls of 6s do 3 damage to attack instead, or unmodified wound rolls. So they're only 125 points now, but again, they're in a tough spot because they don't have that rents, and they're not that reliable to hit either. Forced to hit is a tough spot to be. Same thing with Flayers. They do benefit now in 3.0 that you have your unit champ that can give those command abilities, all out attack, all out defense. That's been helpful in some areas too.
Yeah, like when I think about horrors, I think right now they're probably not that good in the current meta. I think just what you need probably screams more to Flayers and Terrorgeist than you do. I think ghouls are still very important, especially for screening, to leave on objectives, to create chaff. I think the challenge with Crypt Ghouls, though, is that they are battle lined, which means you are going to give away broken ranks, and they don't have a high armor save. They're only, they're only 1 wound. They die to a stiff breeze. So I like the fact that you've got at least reinforced them to, and it is 200 points and 190 points, but you at least make it a little bit harder to give away that broken rank should they go into the Crypt Ghouls. And they're on 25, so
they're very small.
Coherency isn't as bad as some other units.
Yep. And they fit in movement trays really nice too, to be able to make sure you're in coherency. The other thing that we haven't talked about yet is Flesh Eater Courts also have their muster abilities, right? So you have those critical heroes that are able to muster back units that are depleted. So for example, the Crypt Ghouls, if you have a Crypt Ghoul Courtier or a Vargulf in there, they can muster those back. So basically, you're rolling 6 dice for ghouls on a 2-up in your hero phase. You're returning that many models to the unit, which is helpful. And you can do that for your knights, your horrors, and your flayers as well with the right heroes.
And it also allows you, you can double down on that if they're out of combat with rally as well,
Yep.
which is helpful, right? So if you really need to get that 20 block of ghouls back up, you could use the muster. If you needed Emerald Life Swarm, you could bring some bodies back. You could, use a rally. So, you can create that undying horde if you need it. But
Yep.
I think what we were talking about earlier was you wouldn't build a ghoul heavy army.
Right. I think you need some more of that mobility. Ghouls are a little bit slower. They're, I think, a little bit overcosted for what they do right now. It's 95 points for 10. And again, like you said, they die to a stiff breeze. There are ways to buff them up, but because they don't have that rends, they have a lot of attacks, but no rend. They're really tough to get that damage output from them.
And do you really want to buff that unit up? Like, is it? I feel like it's, you're pushing shit uphill, trying to
Right.
buff up a bunch of ghouls. You're better off putting those buffs into the Terrorgeist, the Flayers, some other type of hero. The Vargulf, Smashbat.
Yep. I think that's kind of where you want to focus your efforts, at least in 3.0. You want to focus on those high potential units. I think the ghouls right now, you're kind of playing into that horde, which is not really where the meta's at right now. There are a lot of ways to do a ton of damage to ghouls.
If they had like a free movement at the start of the game or some type of rule, it might be helpful. But yeah, I personally wouldn't put too many points into ghouls unless there was some type of need. But what about
Yeah.
your grand courts? Maybe like let's chunk down a little bit to
Yeah.
just talk about like the builds, right? Because one thing that I learned as a Flesh Eater Courts player is that the grand court that I take often dictates the type of list that I build.
Yep.
You got your Grizzlegore, you got Blister Skin, Hollow Morn, Morgant, and then you don't have to take one and you can just go Feast Day.
Right.
So where do you think the grand courts kind of stand and what's looking good to you right now?
So for Grand Courts, I think Blister Skin is still very powerful. That's the list I ran, the court I ran pretty heavily in 2.0. What that gives you is obviously you get the extra movement on all of your units, an extra 2-inch movement, which is pretty critical. Now you have flayers that are going 12 or 14 inches instead of 12 inches, Terrorgeists that are going 16 inches, obviously still flying. What I really like about Blister Skin is you still have that really cool command ability. Lore of the Burning Skies, we're able to, for a command point, pick up a unit that can fly and basically deep strike them somewhere else on the board, which there's a lot of plays there to get your units in key positions, steal objectives, that sort of thing, against more than 9 inches away from enemy units. We're obviously a very command point heavy army. So the command trait that you have to take for Blister Skin, a 4-up, an extra command point in your hero phase is nice to have as well. And then the artifact worked really well for me in 2.0. This is the one that you have to take if you select a Grand Court. It's the -1 to hit rolls for models wholly within 6 inches of the bearer. That against shooting attacks, there's a shooting heavy meta right now that helps a little bit.
And that could combine really nicely with, say, Unleash Hell, because then all of a sudden, if you can get within, might be a bit hard. If you can get, oh no, actually that wouldn't work. I was just thinking you could maybe do like a -2 to Unleash Hell should you charge in your general, but I guess I don't know.
Yeah, haven't
Depending on
thought
what
about
you're
that.
charging into,
Yeah,
depending on what you're charging into, right? Like, if you go into like, I don't know, Lumineth Archers, for example, they'll do a couple of mortal wounds to you, but a Terrorgeist holding this is going to be able to survive that. Then be able to use what is it, the Gur command point that allows them to fight at the
yeah,
top bracket. So you
yep,
could, because I think that's probably one of the challenges, right? You got 3 flayers, 3 horrors running in. Someone who's going to shoot at you could probably pop at least one of those of your 3 or one of your 6. So, maybe you do need that Ghoul King on Terrorgeist or Ghoul King on Zombie Dragon to soak up the Unleash Hell.
yep. Yeah, range is definitely a problem for Flesh Eater Courts. And again, you're gonna want that someone that unit to soak up Overwatch or Unleash Hell when you're charging into units. And the bigger heroes definitely have a role there, especially where it's combining some key artifacts, Amulet of Destiny, all defense, that sort of thing can use to kind of tank up some of those wounds. And you mentioned brackets. So what I like about Terrorgeist is their damage potential is not that much influenced by what bracket they're on. So their bites are still going to have 3 attacks. So what brackets with the Terrorgeist is their scream gets a little bit harder to inflict those mortal wounds, and they lose some of their skeletal claw attacks, which aren't that reliable anyway. So what I like about Terrorgeist is that even if they're damaged, they still have a lot of output.
Yeah, you can never underestimate. Like, there's a lot of monsters in the game where if they're half wounds taken or three-quarters wounds taken, you can almost write them off like, yeah, they're not going to do that much damage. They're a bit swingy. They don't have a lot of attacks. They won't do a lot of damage. But a Terrorgeist, even on one wound, I've seen it pull down some serious heavy.
Yep.
If they spike and get 1 or even 2 6s to get 12 mortal wounds, I've seen them pull down ironclads 18 mortal wounds, which is you can't leave them with a single wound on. You've got to get rid of them.
Yep. The other thing about Blister Skin, which is really, really nice, is so right now for a normal Flesh Eater Courts army, the only battle line that we have as an option is Ghouls. Blister Skin unlocks Crypt Flayers as battle line, which is really nice because then you're not forced to take those 3 units of Ghouls, and you have some more flexibility there. The other way you can unlock certain units as battle line is by taking the right courtiers. So if you take Crypt Infernal, you can unlock Flayers as battle line as well. If he's your general, same thing with the Crypt Haunter courtier that unlocks the Crypt Horrors as battle line if they're your general.
Yeah, you got to have the general piece, and obviously you've got your Grizzlegord, Terrorgeist, and Zombie Dragons. What do you think about unmounted Terrorgeist and Zombie Dragons in a Grizzlegore build? Given that we are in the monster meta, given that they'll have raw, they'll get you extra victory points.
Yeah, so I think though Grizzlegord definitely has play, especially with those big monsters, Zombie Dragons, Terrorgeists. When you think about the damage potential of a Terrorgeist, the only thing that having a mounted Terrorgeist gets you is an extra 5 attacks for your hero. Obviously, that hero is going to be a wizard, so they get 1 cast. And then what you're giving up by having them unmounted is a summon as well for a command point. But you still have that bite attack that's doing those flat 6 mortal wounds. And then plus the bonus of if you have 3 or more monsters, that unlocks, Ferocious Advance for an extra point. You also have a lot more opportunities to score extra points with battle tactics, broken ranks, that sort of thing.
War Machine brought up a really good point that I probably would have got to later, but he's fast forwarded because it's a really good point. Is that things like flays, for example, only have 1 inch.
Yep.
Now, does that mean? And I know in your list that we kind of previewed when the power went out, you've got little units of 3. You haven't gone out because back into second edition, I used to play against a lot of blocks of 6 or even blocks of 9. People would run those blocks of 9 flayers or horrors. With something like a 1 inch reach on your flayers, has that now meant that you're less likely to run the bigger blocks?
Yeah, so that was my thinking in 3.0. So because of coherency rules now, and because of the unit size, you take them and reinforce them in blocks of 3. If you reinforce a squad of flayers once, now you're at 6 models, more than 5, right? So now your 6 models have to be within 1 inch of at least 2 other models, which means you're only going to be able to get potentially 3 or 3 into combat with a 1 inch range. So and the benefit of having a bigger unit, right, is you're able to muster. They're going to be more survivable, so you can muster more back. They benefit more from your buffs, your D3 attacks, your pylon attack twice. But I think with the new coherency rules, and because they are in blocks of 3, if you could get it, of course, if you have a block of 6 and you lose 1, now you're down to 5, which is a good spot to be in because then you don't have to be within 2 models. But that's kind of where I was thinking is the minimum battle line units, squads of 3, to get around that coherency.
Yeah, I mean, like a block of 6 and 9 will still be good for the mortal wounds with the scream.
Yep.
But yeah, when they start getting into combat, I feel like those really big bases really hurt the flayers. And then I quickly brought up the Horrors War Scroll on my computer just to see how they're tracking. And it's the same deal. They're on 3 attacks, range 1. So, if you go into 6, you're really only attacking with 3 to 4 at most. And I feel like that's just a lot of wasted attacks. And then they don't have any rend. So all of a sudden, like you throw a bunch of attacks and
the other spot that's tough too is they only flayers and horrors, because they're 4 wounds, they still only count as 1 model on objectives, which is really tough too.
Yeah, if they had one more wound, you'd count as 2.
Right.
But they're on that ugly side, right? And their armor say 5. Like it's hard to look. If you get a rally, that's awesome. You get 4 wounds back. But yeah, it's a couple of like punches to the crotch for
Yeah.
flayers and for horrors. But at least flayers have some other options. Again, I can see why you'd want to go down the flayer route.
Yeah, I think because the horrors are cheaper too, there might be some more play. We can talk about Hall more when we get there. It might be some more play there, but I think right now you really want to focus on those monsters. So kind of getting back to Gristlegore, Gristlegore has the ability to take your big monsters as battle line. So you can take your unmounted Terrorgeist, your unmounted zombie dragons as battle line for a Royal Terrorgeist, Royal Zombie Dragon, which is really nice. Again, there's a lot of opportunities to achieve battle tactics there. Their command or their allegiance ability for Gristlegore is interesting. If an unmodified hit roll for Gristlegore is 6, it inflicts 2 hits instead of 1. Of course, there you now with 3.0 in 2.0, you could stack that with your flat 6 mortal wounds and the Terrorgeist's bite. Now you have to choose, right? Are you gonna two hits, or are you gonna do your flat 6 mortal wounds? So I think that's a little bit of a nerf to Gristlegore there.
I think if I was building a Flesh Eater Courts army, I think definitely for me, the Grizzlegore build is still the strongest, because when I think about some of the meta, you've got Mega Gargants, you've got Archaon and Friends, you've got Marathi and not Marathi and Gotrek, actually. That, like, the Flesh Eater, actually, that would probably, like, that would not be good, because you can only do 3 wounds maximum to Marathi a turn, and old little Ginger Ninja only turns everything into 1 damage, right?
Yep.
So those high attacks, high rend, or high damage, high rend means nothing against Gotrek. At least you've got the movement to kind of avoid him. But I feel like if you're coming against Nagash, Alariel, these god monsters, and that's what we're kind of facing right now, a lot of god tier monsters. Yeah, I feel like the Terrorgeist at least are good.
So
I think they're kind of what I'd build around.
I mentioned earlier, a Flesh Eater Course is now kind of a scalpel because you don't have you don't have the staying power. You're relatively low saves, really tough to stay around. So you really gotta, when you commit to go into something, you gotta commit to go into it. So that's where Glistigore I think would help. So you don't want to send just one Terrorgeist at an Alariel at a Gotrek if you're going in. You want to send multiple big monsters to make sure that you're able to kill that. What Gristlegore has going for you as well is if you have a mounted zombie dragon and mounted Terrorgeist, you have to give them that artifact or that command trait for Savage Strike. So they have strike first if they made a charge move. So if you have 2 Terrorgeists, one's mounted, one's unmounted, you both charge into the same unit, you're both going to be able to go before that model gets to attack you back. And then potentially, if you have a command point available, you're going to be able to pilot and attack again with one of those. So you have a lot of damage potential going in with a Gristlegore list with multiple big dragons.
Yeah, and I like it. And as I mentioned as well, like right now while we're playing in Gur, you could take an Alpha Beast pack for an extra D6-inch move before the game started. So if you do win the drops or you do get to choose, at least it means that, you could potentially turn 1 charge, then do the double pilot. And I think the board size, I'm going to bring up Brad's question in a second. The board size for Grizzlegore, I think works really well because there are less screens, there are less objectives, there are more people putting their points into elites and to heroes. So, and that's always been one of like the most annoying things for Grizzlegore is that there used to be a lot of chaff screens, 20, 40, 60 man blocks, and you couldn't get into the juicy stuff. Now there's a lot less of that. So you can get in to what you want to get to, or at least there's a better option for you. But then when it comes to the board size, Brad was asking around things like horrors using deranged transformation with Hallowmourn's Ravenous Crusades. Does that change horrors at all? And I could bring up the rules if you don't happen to have a photographic memory.
Yeah, so I think Brad's question, Deranged Transformation, right? So it's a spell you cast on a unit. You can, if they have a wounds characteristic of 4 or 5 or less, basically you add the wounds characteristic to their movement. So now you can have Krypt, if that spell goes off on Crypt Horrors, you can have Crypt Horrors moving 11 inches. So a pretty fast movement for them. I tend to like that spell more on flares because you're able to move that flare from 12 inches to 16 inches, which is impactful for first turn because then you have potential to get a first turn charge off. But yeah, it definitely does help Crypt Horrors there. Their Ravenous Crusaders ability, I haven't seen a whole lot of play with that. That's an ability where you have to spend a command point, and then you get +1 to run in charge. And you can also run in charge in the same turn. So you're giving those players or those horrors a lot of extra movement, but you're losing a command point for that. And this is really a command point hungry army, even without, because you want to save those command points for Feeding Frenzy to pile in and attack twice. And I don't think that the Crypt horrors have the output that you need to be able to accomplish anything significant.
And because of the coherency as well, I think that's
Yeah,
probably the big key as well, right? Is that one, there's no rend. It's not like it's a high amount of attacks. And then you're not getting, like, if you pay for 6 or you pay for 9. I think that's what I'm used to a lot. And I don't want to harp on too much because I think it's just the challenge you've got to work around is how do you get around these coherency issues when, you're paying for 6, 9, 9, you're double reinforcing your horrors, but you only get like just over half of them actually in combat because of
right.
the large base sizes and the low range. It's what IDK with their thralls have an issue with, right? They've got a 1 inch attack, 32 mil base. They can only get in half, if just over half of their models in combat.
Yeah, at that point, they're just ablative wounds, which is good because you're going to have a unit that's going to stay around and have the potential to do more damage over time. But I think you need to look at where you're putting those points. We were talking about Crystal Gore, and you mentioned, having the Alpha Beast pack and then being able to potentially Alpha Strike. I've come around from 2.0. I was very heavy into trying to Alpha Strike, get the priority, try to throw something in the opponent's face, make him deal with it, and then that gives you the freedom to react around to the rest of the board. I think with the smaller board size now, and because Flesh Eater Courts still have that high mobility, I've kind of come around to the other side where I'd rather be able to react to what my opponent's doing, and not throw those key units away turn 1. Be able to pick and choose where I want to engage with what units and play more of a reactive game in 3.0.
It's why people are like, the first battle tactic most people will do is run 3 units in, if their monsters get the extra VP. Like that seems to be one of the most popular battle tactics early on. But sometimes that can be really powerful if you're playing against double shooting bow snakes. The cruel
Yep.
boys. You might want to get the jump on the dragons when the Stormcast dragons come. I don't know how they're going to kind of fit into battalions and things like that. But because the last thing you want is just shot off the board, right? Double
Right.
shooting bow snakes will just shoot you off the board. You'll give away VP and you got nothing left. So
Yep.
but you're right. Like I don't feel as aggressive as I used to be. I'm holding back my army 1 turn, possibly 2 turns, racking up those battle tactics. And then kind of like turn 3 when that kind of, where the objectives are going to be. And if there's, an objective move because it's too tiny shift or whatever it is, you can engage appropriately.
Yeah, and the other thing that you can do too is by staying back a little bit more. That's why I really like this army, because you get the flexibility with the summons, right? So the heroes that you bring in, some of them have the ability for a command point to summon another unit, right? With the Terrorgeist, you can summon horrors or flayers. With the Abhorrent Archregent, you can summon 20 ghouls, horrors, flayers, or a Courtier hero. Zombie Dragon, you can summon in a Courtier hero. So you have this flexibility with your summons to be able to drop units on the board to either influence what your opponent's going to do or grab those key objectives that might be out of reach for you. And
Yeah,
that's unexpected a lot of time for your opponent.
and it's quite hard. Like I've played plenty of Flesh Eater Courts armies, and they'll drop 500, 700 points just from the cheeky free summons, and
Yep.
all of a sudden it's now 2,000 points versus 3,000 points. And I think using that to your advantage. Is there anything that you like to summon more than others? And I know obviously you can respond to your opponent and
Yep.
like in a scenario, but is there things that you draw from more?
So what I've the challenge with summons and what I've been trying to develop in my play style is ideally you'd like to have your summons as late in the game as possible. You don't want to draw upon them until you need them in that critical spot, because they come in 6 inches from any board edge. You can get them exactly where you need to go. The challenge there is if your heroes that are doing those summons, the Terrorgeists, want to be aggressive, they want to get stuck in, and if you don't use that summon before they die, you're going to lose it. So what I've been trying to do more recently is, as soon as the game starts, do my summons. So basically, you're doing that force multiplication immediately. I tend to like to summon flayers, I also like to summon Courtier heroes. So the Vargulf, I like to summon a lot with the Born Chart Regent. That's why I included that in my list, because basically you have a 245-point model, 240-point model that can summon in either 180 points for the Flayers or 160 points for the Vargulf. So I like to summon in those key support pieces as well as the Flayers, just because they do have that high movement. I don't think I very rarely summon in horrors, because I think Flayers are just better at what they do for the points.
Yeah,
You can either
yeah,
summon in 180 points of Flayers or 125 points worth of horrors.
yeah. Or you bring in ghouls if you need
Yep.
screens and leave something on the objective. I think, yeah, I think unfortunately for Brad, who loves the ideas of horrors, and flayers for me were always the thing that I really enjoyed. I think just I don't want to like rubbish poo poo poor old horrors too much, but I think it's just a lot of things going against them right now that doesn't play to their strengths. And maybe there'll be a time where horrors become good again. And when armor save stacking has been stopped, and you can only get a maximum, I don't know, a 3-up armor save, or some type of change comes into the game, it might be a bit more viable, or maybe they get a 2-inch range. But right now, there's just a lot of things that kind of says to me, go ghouls, go flayers, go terrorgeists.
Yeah, I think Crypt Horrors might have some play. There are only 125 points. If you can get big enough units and you kind of spam those, again, your damage potential is going to be limited on them, just because of the no rend and then the coherency rules. But that still is a lot of wounds to chew through.
They could be a good screen as well. Like if you're
Yeah.
thinking about, if they're not a battle line choice, they could be a screen that's not going to give away broken ranks. You could protect things still. They are quite fast and durable, and they will work. But I probably wouldn't build around this massive output of damage from horrors. That's probably the way I'm looking at them is a little bit different.
Yep. I feel the same way.
And you've been loving Feast Day. It gives you a
I
bit more
have.
flexibility, and I look at it right. Hollow Morn, not bad. I like the movement stuff. You had Smashbat. The buffed up Vargulf. Put
Yep.
flaming weapon on him, run him up the board like Super Saiyan. He can still do the do. I think the challenge is there's a little bit of hard magic going on right now. There's a lot of good magic casters that could stop the Smashbat if you happen to be, climbing up the boards of a tournament. The Morgant, for me, the challenge is that ghouls are just not strong. And I think losing Ghoul Patrol, they lost more than they gained the ghouls. I don't think there's a lot of like positives that ghouls came out of. I don't know. How do you feel about, both the Grand Court and ghouls?
Yeah, so I think ghouls have a role in this army because you're basically your reliable way to get bodies on an objective. You're not able to get more than one model for your flayers and horrors. Your monsters are still going to count as 5, and your heroes are still going to count as 2. But ghouls are the only way to reliably get bodies on objectives to control them. I feel like ghouls are better in larger units. The smaller units of ghouls the 10-man units tend to blow over relatively easy. But if you have that 20 model unit, that 30 model unit, they're relatively hard to punch off objectives if you have a hero near them. So you got your death save if they're wholly within 6 of a hero. You got your muster. If you have a smaller hero near them, either your Vargulf or your Crypt Ghoul Courtier with the muster up to D6 back. Then you also have your rally ability if they're not engaged with something. So they're relatively tough to shake off, and 30 wounds on objective is nothing to snuff at.
Yeah, no, they're good. But
yeah, you wouldn't want to. I don't think you'd want to build a list around them though, just because you're
yeah,
limited again by your damage potential on them.
they have a role, but they're probably not going to be the anchor point to my force. And I'm going to look at all the synergies and the buffs to buff up my ghouls, because just purely because they're probably not the best value for money. Again, like, if you love your ghouls and you've already bought 100 ghouls and you're a mad lad, you do you, run your ghouls, spam them to your heart's content. But if I was starting off Flesh Eater Courts, I'm probably not quite building around all of the ghouls.
I mean, I think
But
they have a play too, because even though they have no rends, they're relatively cheap, have a high number of attacks. So the other answer to save stacking besides mortal wound output is just, I'm going to make you roll dice, right? So your ghouls are able to do that very easy. You have a 30 block of ghouls, they have 4 attacks each, piling in and attacking twice. Yeah, you might not be able to get them all in, but that's a lot of dice you're going to force your opponent to roll. And maybe you're going to see some 1s and 2s in there if they have a higher save.
And that's what's going into Gotrek. That's what's going into Marathi. You're not
Right.
throwing in the Terrorgeist or the Flayers because they will come out second best. But if you choke them up with, especially Gotrek, because he can only ever take a maximum damage of 1. Anything that's like 2 damage or more, it gets reduced to 1. So if you can just throw an absolute high volume of attacks, surround him as best as you can, that's a really good chance to try to take down Gotrek.
Yeah. They're already getting 2 attacks each. If they have more than 20 models, down to getting 3 attacks each. You can buff them up with that Ferocious Hunger from an important arch region, or the Black Hunter to give them another D3 or 1 attack. So you have a lot of potential to do a lot of attacks with them. Again, no rend, but still 4s and 4s ain't that bad.
No, they're not. Especially again, if you're just throwing pure weight of dice, there's only so many armor saves that those Blood Knights, those like obviously anything with a ward is going to be a bit different, but high volume of attacks will work quite nicely. But we keep like trying to get into Feast Day, and we keep kind of getting out of it.
Oh,
So
yep.
we've kind of like covered we've covered most of the Grand Courts. I want to tap into Feast Day because
Sure.
I love the fact that it doesn't landlock you into an artifact, a command trait, and it's probably one of the things I enjoyed the most from the new Stormcast and Auric book is the fact that they don't actually force your sub factions to have an artifact, a command trait. You build it the way you want to build it.
Yeah, so Feast Day is one of the delusions of the 6 that you can pick if you do not go with the Grand Court. I think Feast Day is probably the most powerful. What Feast Day allows you to do is once per turn, and that's your turn and your opponent's turn, you can use the free Feeding Frenzy command ability without a command point being spent. And again, Feeding Frenzy is that ability to pile in and attack again immediately. So over the course of the game, you're basically getting 10 free command points because you're going to be want to be using that Feeding Frenzy as many opportunities as you can. Granted, in 3.0, it's only once per turn now, but you still have 10 opportunities to use that if you're engaged on every turn. So that extra 10 command points is huge, I think. Then, as you mentioned, it doesn't lock you into a specific command trait or specific artifacts. So you're able to pick that Amulet of Destiny without having to do that Warlord Battalion to get that extra artifacts.
I was just reading over the other delusions, and the other one that I probably really like outside of the Feast Day is a matter of honor. I really like that because we've lost a lot of rerolls in the game. So being able to, and there's a lot of heroes right now in the meta, so there's a lot of points being tied up. So the fact that you get to reroll hit rolls of 1, so you can still do all out attack and things like that. You get the free rerolls of 1, which is great. And then if it's your general going in, and obviously targeting a hero, then you get to reroll 1s to wound, and then you combine that with the best day ever or your finest hour, get +1 to wound. So you're rerolling 1s to wound, and you're getting +1 to wound, rerolling 1s to hit, get +1 attack from all out attack. Should you burn that? Like all of a sudden, like is this something that you really want to kill? Get that Terrorgeist into RKO and get that Terrorgeist into whatever it might be.
Yep.
Really good chance you're going to pull that down in that turn.
Yeah, and then if you're taking that delusion, you still have the ability to strike again, right? If you use that command point, so all those buffs will still carry over when you attack for the next time.
Yes, yeah, no, I like it because those delusions are not a command ability, so it still allows you to issue Feeding Frenzy. It still allows to issue other things. So if you need all out attack, boom, you can do it. I love it. No, I dig it.
Yeah, I think I've been running Feast Day even at the end of 2.0. I just think it outweighs the benefits the other courts get you right now.
I know you were. I want to get to your list in a minute, and I just want to set this up because one of the lists that you kind of sent me and we talked a little bit about were things like Mega Gargants, and I know you've got some ideas, and I think you might have even been playing around with bringing in a Mega Gargant. And what's your experience for anyone who's thinking about dropping that serious cash into? You get the Gatebreaker, right? Death gets the Gatebreaker Mercenary.
Yep, I think obviously Mega Gargants are doing very well in the meta that we have right now. It is the monster meta. Flesh Eater Course has a lot of abilities to get those monsters. What they lack right now, I feel like, is that survivability. What our highest save on even on Terrorgeist is a 4. You do have some after saves. What a Mega gets you though is a big threat, especially with the Mega Gargant. It's still fast. It's going to be moving 12 inches, and it's just a huge chunk of 35 wounds that your opponent has to chew through, while all of the rest of your list is doing whatever it wants. So I've run a couple games with a Mega Gargan, and every game I do, I just throw it straight at the enemy. They have to deal with it. It's in their face. They're going to kill it. But while they're trying to kill that Mega Gargan, I'm using my scalpel to pick off key support pieces, getting on the board position I want to be in to set myself up really, really well for the rest of the game.
Do you find if you were going to include a Mega Gargan into your list, are you finding that takes the role of one of your Terrorgeist, your Ghoul Kings on Terrorgeist, or is it eating into like your troop choices?
No, so I think a Mega Gargan is 525 points, I believe. Ghoul King on Terrorgeist is 445, so it's kind of in that range. I still want to have my troops. It's really basically replacing a Terrorgeist.
Okay, so it's not like you're culling your troops down to an absolute minimum to go Hero Hammer. It's that you're taking out that second or third Terrorgeist, Ghoul King Terrorgeist, or even like a Terrorgeist without hero, and you're just flipping that out to be a Mega. You obviously get 5 on the objective. It's 35 wounds. All that defense makes it a 3-up armor save. It can heal. It can do a heroic action. So. You do lose that one command point at the start, though, so that does hurt a little bit, especially if you're going summoning. But at least you got the Charnel Throne to help you with the free summon early. It's almost like a minor trade-off.
Yeah, and that Mega Gargant that the Fleshier Courts have access to is the damage one, so it's the Gatebreaker. So it's got a lot of output as well. It doesn't have the mortal wounds per se that a Terrorgeist would have, but it's still got 10 attacks, -3 rend, 3 damage. So again, it brings up that higher rend that we're lacking elsewhere in Fleshier Courts.
I think the other thing as well, Omega, and I don't want to go, this is not the Mega Gargan show, but the other thing I wanted to call out is the fact that if you run a Mega Gargan into your opponent, and I guess, Terrorgeist remains true, there's always that other threat of another Terrorgeist or some type of other big threat monster. So I was like, well, if I deal with the Mega and I know I've got to pull down the Mega, got to put a lot of resources into the Mega, I've still got to deal with this Terrorgeist. I don't know where it's going to go. And the fact that it's got high movement, it's always a threat. You just got to handle it. And it's like, where do I handle? And some people just don't have the tools to handle both. Or even a double Terrorgeist. That is a scary proposition if they either break off and go independently, or if they hunt as a pack.
Yep, and I think there's a play too with if you have a couple big mobile threats with the whether it's 2 Terrorgeist, whether it's a Mega Gargan and Terrorgeist, you're basically you have a bait unit, right? You're gonna want to throw one out, see how your opponent reacts to that model, and then that gives you the flexibility to pick and choose where you want to engage. So it's really I like running all of those big threats, big monsters in twos, because you're going to throw one out and then be able to react based on what your opponent does to deal with that threat.
Do you like the endless spells at the moment? Because I know that it always used to be the I've forgotten the name, the chalice.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember the chalice was just like one of those favorites you chuck in the middle of the board, get a whole bunch of dice, heal up.
Yeah, it's more expensive now. I tried it a couple times in 2.0. I wasn't super impressed with it. It's 70 points. It was cheaper. So basically what that chalice is going to do is every time a model dies, you're going to put a counter on it, and then on a 4-up, you can heal. At the end of the turn, you can heal wounds to other models that are around it, or return models to Fleshier Courts, with the wound characteristic at 1. So basically means you can return ghouls with the chalice, or you can heal up models within 12 inches of it. I tend to not use this spell because I don't want to be in a certain spot. Because you have to be near it, and once you cast it, it's staying in the certain spot. I want to be mobile and not have to stand near a chalice to be able to get that stuff back up. I also think we have the ability to return models with musters, and I think that's probably a better space to put your points in. For the same cost as a chalice, you can bring a Crypt Ghoul Courtier, and every turn, if that Crypt Ghoul Courtier is near your ghouls, you can bring back D6 anyways on a 2-up.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think the key was the chalice, I think, works really well with things like the Terrorgeist, because again, you're just healing them up, especially if they're hunting as a pack.
Yep.
That you're just healing them up, and they're just, and then you can obviously use heroic action to heal as well if you need to. Really good leadership. But you're right, like if you are thinking about maybe healing up your ghouls, and there's a lot of opponents who can unbind your endless spells right now. Priest can do it.
Yep.
You can also now do it as a heroic action. Maybe you are better off with a more guaranteed Courtier, Vargulf, some type of support hero. And if they're attacking and shooting your support hero, cool. They're not attacking your Terrorgeist or your Flayers.
Right.
So it's like win-win, right? If they're going for one of your small heroes.
Yeah, and I think Fleshy Courts are in a tough spot with casting right now too. So they don't have a whole lot of abilities to be able to get that plus to cast. Yeah, they have an artifact, but you're spending some artifacts on it to get +1 cast and unbinds. Yeah, they have a command trait, but that's really it. You're looking at maybe +1 to cast at most. So against
Yeah.
a lot of armies, especially your god monsters, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of spells off.
Yeah, I'll run around with Marathi in my Daughters of Cain, who has a natural +1 to her cast, and there's a heap of spells she just doesn't get off. Like
Yeah.
plus 1 is not a lot, and then you start going against Lumineth and Zinch and Nagashes, and certain armies like that have just like auto unbinds.
Yeah,
Like you
Seraphon's really
can't
tough.
rely, yeah, you can't rely on those +1s, and I think that's probably the other caveat is that with endless spells, they all went up in points. There's now more chances to unbind them. And if you don't have a really strong caster, you can't bank on having it around often. And then a smart opponent will unbind it. If there's an endless spell already on the table, they'll unbind it in your turn, which means you can't recast it in your turn, which means it's just points on the table you can't tap
Right.
into.
And I think everything the Chalice does, I think the Life Swarm does better because it's less points. You're going to get the 2d3 turns that it comes down for a heal. So I think in most scenarios, I'd rather take an Endless Life Swarm than a Chalice right now.
Yeah, that's a good call. I know that there's been like the Horse Stampede and there's been a whole bunch of other ones, but I think the Chalice was the one that I always saw a lot. And even actually, when I think about it, and I can't think off the top of my head if they've changed a lot, but there's a couple of debuff braveries as well, like a couple of endless spells that could help get more of those flare attacks in.
Yeah, there was one, the Horror Gas in 2.0.
Yes.
Unfortunately, in 3.0, they changed the way that spell works. It lost the bravery debuff, which hurts a little bit.
Which, if it was around, that probably would work. Because that was probably one of my plays back in the day. Was I'd have a block of flayers, you throw down the horror ghast, get that -1 plus any other ways you can kind of debuff, as you said, artifacts and things like that, and then just roll those 2d6, get into combat. You don't get the minus, for being within 3, and you just like scream.
Yeah, that was my go-to artifact in 2.0, the Grim Garland on a Terrorgeist. It's a -2 bravery aura around him. Throw your Terrorgeist in, you have some flayers nearby, you're automatically going to be at -2 bravery against like low bravery armies, Destruction, Skaven. It does a lot of work.
Do you dip into your allies much? I remember the last time I played against Flesh Eater Courts, people were allying in things like and this might have changed with Soul Blight kind of getting some new keywords and things, but people used to love, let's say, the corpse cart, because the
Yep.
corpse cart used to, and I'd have to check the language now, but it used to only work on death, and even like the Vampire Lord used to give like +1 attack. It used to work really nicely. Do you touch your ally pool at all?
So yeah, they changed the corpse cart to now only affect Soul Blight units.
Yeah.
Right now, Fletcher Courts in 3.0 can only ally in with Soul Blight, which is there's a lot of potential there. I think some things that could be considered for Soul Blight for allies is Deathwalker zombies have a spot in Fletcher Courts. I'm sorry, my dog's barking right now.
That's all right. He agrees. The dog agrees
Yeah.
that zombies are the place to be. It's a nice screen.
Yeah, it's 20 bodies for I think it's 100. A lot. They don't have a save, so they could be. And again, you're looking at 95 points for ghouls or 120 points, 120 points for 20 zombies. A lot more bodies you can get there. There's some other interesting things you can do with Soul Blight heroes. Obviously, like Radikar, Belladama. Those all could be some good support pieces that would work well with Flesh Eater Courts to try and do what you want to do.
Yeah, Belladama is a great way to avoid Unleash Hell, being able to cast a spell, do a wound. You've now got a little unit of doggos in combat, so you can kind of avoid Unleash Hell, then you get in.
Yep.
And Radika kind of is like another version of like the Smash Bat. If people don't know the Smash Bat, it used to be, is it Hallowmorn, Vargulf? You buff him up with, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, Ferocious Hunger. Plus D3 attacks. He's got he'd have a Billows Decanter. He'd get another couple attacks. Basically, it's just a small hero that's going to do a lot of attacks at high damage.
Is there any armies that you struggle with? I know some people are asking me about, how do you handle things like, your god heroes, but, like forget them for a second. Let's just talk overall. Like, who are your bad matchups?
Gargants are tough, just because they have, especially if you do, I think it was a Taker tribe or something that gives the 30 models on objective for Gargant. That's really, really tough to deal with. You basically got to throw your entire army at one Gargant per turn to be able to grind them down. So that's really, really challenging. Also, Flesh Eater Courts are pretty not that survivable, so giants will do a lot of damage to them. God heroes are tough too. Again, you just got to make sure you're committing the right resources at the right time to kill those. So Archeon's a challenge. You pretty much got to throw most of your army at it in a single turn to be able to grind it down. And then that's if you're able to kill it. Otherwise, you're probably going to lose because Archeon will just kill the rest of your army. So again, I think Flesh Eater Courts right now is a 3-2, maybe 2-3 army because there's some hard counters that we can't deal with. Shooting's very challenging as well. There's heavy shooting meta right now against those shooting lists. You pretty much want to alpha them to try to get in as soon as possible to lock up those units. It's tough.
Would you consider allying in the Felbats? Because they're a perfect little. They're fast. They are great to soak up, unleash hell, and if they die, who cares? Like it's just damaging. That's not going into your Terrorgeist.
Yep, that's definitely a great play too. Have those little units running around that can soak up that Overwatch, that can jump on objectives. Again, I think Flesh Eater Courts really want to be reactive and they want to maintain their mobility, and that those Felbats fit right in with that style of play.
And like 75 points or something, they can act as a screen. You're not going to give away broken ranks. If you need them to run into the backfield, the sort of Savage Spearhead, they're not a lot of models. So, there's some interesting play. I think, even though the Soul Blight has and all of the armies have tightened up their language to be battle tome, inclusive, and they don't care about, Grand Alliance kind of keywords much these days. But those bats kind of act independently, don't need any love, just send them up the board, and probably works nicely with some of the shooting armies right now, and possibly going to be having even more shooting in the meta.
Yep.
Anything else we want to with? I want to bring up your list,
Sure.
and we'll do it. But before we get there, is anything else we should probably talk about with Feck? I feel like we've covered a lot of stuff so far about Feck. Yeah. It's an interesting army, despite how few models you actually have.
Yeah, there's
you don't
a lot
have
of different ways to play it.
Is that challenging for you, like to not have a lot of options? Like when something's not working, we talked about horrors right now. Like, they're not that good. There's not a lot of swing that, there's only so many things you can do with your army.
Yeah, I think it's beneficial for newer players for Flesh Eater Courts just because there are so few options for models. But I think there still is a lot of flexibility. So the flexibility that you bring with Flesh Eater Courts is all of your hero choices. So you have a ton of heroes. You have way more heroes than you do actual units. But it's beneficial for me as I built my collection. I could build, I know I'm going to need a bunch of flayers. I know I'm going to need horrors and ghouls. And then from there, it's just picking and choosing what heroes you want to be able to make the army do what you want it to do. So I think it's for newer players, it's a really easy army to get into.
Do you have a favorite hero?
Yeah, so I really liked the Krypt Infernal Courtier. So it's basically just a hero flare. It's only 130 points. What it does is it unlocks Krypt flares as battle line for any allegiance you pick, even if you're Hollowmorn, even if you're Gristlegore. So there's a lot of flexibility there. He also musters those flares back, which is really nice. He's got a range attack. He's a pretty good. He's usually my general in all the armies that I play. For all the
and I just want to put this out, Games Workshop. If you're listening to me, and maybe you do, I don't know, please sort out this Courtier rubbish. Like, I'm sick of buying a box of flayers and having to dedicate one to being a Courtier. Or I buy a box of ghouls and I have to dedicate one. Then I have a weird number of flayers and horrors. And just make me an Underworld's Warband that has one of each Courtier. I can buy it once. I have all the heroes for my army, and then I don't have to break up. Let me just do that for me, please. Like,
yeah,
please.
That'd be really nice.
It's so annoying. So annoying.
Yep.
I knew the people in Flesh Eater Courts would appreciate that, but that's genuinely, like, it annoys me so much. But as we found out when you went with the blackout, here is the list. It is a feast day. You've come from the Realm of Hirsch. You've gone Hold the Line. Is that we probably didn't talk about that. Like, is there like grand strategies? Is Hold the Line the best one for you? Are there other ones you kind of toy between? Like, you don't really have, the magic build, like you don't have priests.
Yeah, so you you could couple options for Flesh Eater Courts. If you're running monster heavy, you could do Beastmaster, keep your beasts alive. For this list, was split between Hold the Line and Prize Sorcery because both your Ghoul Kings and your Archregent are wizards. So keep one of those alive or keep your battle line alive. Yeah, so I think Beastmaster, Prize Sorcery, and Hold the Line are really good options for battle tactics. It just depends on what you want to do. Because we're a relatively squishy army, it's what are going to be your aggressive models. If you're going to be aggressive with your heroes, you don't want to pick them as your battle tactic to keep them alive. And I think for right now, for me, I'd rather be more aggressive with my heroes and try to keep my battle line alive, holding those key points.
Yes, DEFCON, you could just buy the Underworld's Warband for the Courtier, but I'm more talking about the Flayer, the Horror, the other versions of the Courtiers, even like the Ghoul King. I think this is like, give me some new models. The Vargulf, love a new Vargulf. Don't talk about Cursed City. There's a sweet ass Vargulf in there that nobody can access to, but that's not the point. Your list is, I think there might be one error in this list though. Just having a look at this really quickly. So
The
you've
mount
got your
trait,
tool.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, the double mount trait. You've got to get yourself Warlords or Commanding Entourage to get a second mount trait. So just really quickly, which of the mount traits would you keep versus what would you drop?
So I'd probably keep Gruesome Bite, but I think there's a discussion there to be had between Gruesome Bite and Razor Clawed for Terrorgeist.
And I'm trying to pronounce that. Any reason why you'd go Razor Clawed over the Grim Garland mount trait?
The Grim Garland's actually an artifact. It's not a mount trait.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
I thought so. I'm like, wait a second, when did the Grim Garland become a mount trait? All right, back to the topic. So you got your Ghoul King on Terrorgeist, Amulet of Destiny, which is our 5-up ward. You've got Gruesome Bite, and you got Spectral Host. You got another Terrorgeist. Let's ignore the mount trait, but it's got Flaming Weapon, which is a universal spell.
Yep.
You got yourself Deranged Transformation coming out of the Archregent. You've got yourself a Crypt Infernal Courtier, which is the general, and it has the Dark Host command trait, which is, oh no, you get to choose this one.
Yep. So
I was
this
going to say,
makes him a wizard and gives him a spell choice.
very nice. You got 3 units of 5 Flayers, 1 unit of 20 Crypt Ghouls. You've gone the Battle Regiment, so it's a 2-drop. So obviously only one of the Terrorgeist is in the Battle Regiment, one is the other drop. If we wanted the second mount trait, we'd have to go Warlord or something. And you've got 97 wounds, which is pretty decent in Age of Sigmar 3. It's not the highest, not the lowest. It's a good amount of wounds. Obviously, having the regeneration as well. But that's 2 drops, 1995. So you're unlikely to get your Triumph. But if you do, it's bloodthirsty.
Yep. So a couple things here. So it is only 97 wounds. But you got to think about there's the potential to summon in 3 units with this list, right? So the 2 Ghoul Kings as well as the Archregent can summon in. So you're looking at summoning in 36 more wounds if you're picking Flayers or Horrors to bring those in.
They're 4 wounds apiece. You get to bring in 3.
Yep, 3 units of 3.
Oh yeah, so 12, 24, 36.
Yeah.
And then obviously the regeneration of coming back from the Courtier.
Yep.
Yeah. Ludo, we've already just said that we can't have a second mount trait without an extra battalion. So we just literally said scrap the Razor Clawed, but let's pretend it's not there. Let's pretend it was my input error. So only one mount trait, which is on the general. No, not on the general, the first Terrorgeist. Anyway, Will, talk to me about why did you build this way? Why the double Terrorgeists? Because for me, like, why not a zombie dragon?
Yeah, so I think again we talked about it earlier, but I think the army lacks high rends output, so you really got to focus on those mortal wounds. And those Abhorrent Ghoul Kings on Terrorgeist have the flat 6 mortal wounds on their bite attacks. It's just a huge threat. They're able to delete units or delete those key pieces. I have 2 of them because you're going to have to deal with 2. And I usually run them together. So you're going to have 2 of those big mobile threats running up the board that can have a pretty good chance of deleting something that they get in combat with. From there, I think the Abhorrent Archregent's an auto include just because it's a 2-cast wizard. Its spell is amazing. Ferocious Hunger, I think it's cast on a 6, and you give a unit plus D3 attacks. Now think about that on a Terrorgeist. So suddenly you're going to get D3 attacks to all of their profiles. And then that includes the bite attack as well.
And it's a very generous range too of 24 inches of the
Yeah.
caster. It is wholly within, but when you notice what a 24-inch bubble looks like on the smaller tables, it's most of the board.
Yeah.
It's
If you have that
24 inches is a lot of the board.
if that arch region is in the middle of the board, you're pretty much going to be able to touch the whole board with that spell.
Yeah, like it's very generous, very generous. I look, I really like the arch region as well. Sit it on top of the charnel throne right at the start. Get yourself those 3 knights, those 20 serfs, or that 1 courtier, and then keep it up on the board, trying to find that arcane terrain. Taking advantage of the magic. I think being able to use arcane, not arcane bolt, mystic shield, or what have you given it? Deranged transformation.
Yep, to give more mobility to the flayers of the ghouls. I think for the charnel throne too, now it's in 3.0, it's garrisonable. So you could garrison your arch region in there at the start of the game as well.
And for anyone who hasn't really looked at the garrisoning rules, what does that do for you?
So you're going to have -1 to hit and a +1 to save. And then it makes your you measure range from the base of your charnel throne, so it expands his range by a couple inches as well.
And I think Jonathan's asked a question that's a bit of a loaded question. I think we both know the answer to this one, but do you always use your charnel throne?
So when I remember to bring it to tournaments, I always put it down. I think to answer your questions though, I always deploy with it. If you handicap yourself by wanting to have your arch regent next to your throne until you do the summon for free, I think you're missing out on a lot of different plays that you could do over the course of the day. And that arch regent can be very influential because he does have a lot of wounds. He does have a lot of attacks. He regens 3 wounds. To answer your question, no, I don't always use the free summon on the throne with the arch regent. It kind of depends on what my opponent's doing and where I need that arch regent. So I especially in a feast day list where you have those, you're not spending those command points on feeding frenzy. You have some more flexibility to, yep, I'll take the hit. I'll spend the command point in the arch regent to do my summon, even though he's not near the throne, because that's where I need him to be.
Interesting, because my experience against players have always been that arch regent hugs the charnel throne. Like it's like its second home. Like it never leaves. It is always sitting on top, garrison or no garrison. If it have, like that is my experience. So the fact that you don't always do it and you're running him around the board just being a nightmare, it's an interesting play.
Because that's predictable for your opponent too. If you see an arch regent in a throne, you're reasonable chance that he's going to stay on that throne. It gets nice to be able to move him around and do unexpected things with him because he can fly too.
Yeah, I mean, like he's got a 4-up armor save as well, which is awesome. If you need all that defense, or you put him on, as you said, the garrisonable charnel throne, all of a sudden you're on a 3-up armor save. So that's pretty durable for you.
Yeah, very.
It's super durable for Flesh Eater Course. Like if you said it was a 3-up armor save, yeah. And War Machine, I have no idea why serfs is a keyword. Like I don't feel like they've ever done much with it other than some very basic stuff in the book.
Yeah, for me, I picture it as a lore piece, right? You think back to Bretonnians, and in the lore, Bretonnians may be turned into flesh eater courts. You had your serfs, your peasants, then you also had your knights, which were your horrors and flayers, and your peasants were the serfs.
By the way, I do like that you are the only Flesh Eater Courts player I know that we always joke about, Flesh Eater Courts being Bretonia. Ha ha ha, very funny. You're actually the only person I know who have actually made the leap from Bretonia to Flesh Eater Courts. So,
yeah, I tried to model my units based off that motif as well. So my mounted heroes have Bretonian motifs thrown in. So
yeah, I dig it. A lot of my Flesh Eater Courts are all converted from the Empire. So like I've even got like a musician. I've got a standard bearer. I've got little helmets kind of melted onto them. Like I've got
awesome.
Free Guild General. I don't know if you know the Free Guild General on Griffin has like a big like armor plate.
Yep.
All of my terror guys have like an armor plate with
a
crest
that's awesome.
and
That's
things.
really
so
good
I've gone into like the knights of the Flesh Eater Courts. So you got your terror guys, you've got your arch regent, the courtier. Obviously, we talked a little bit about, and would you add a Vargulf into this list, or is it because it's not a Hallowmorn that you wouldn't tap into the Vargulf?
So I think a Vargulf does everything better than a Crypt Infernal Courtier. It's a little bit more points. What a Vargulf does not do for this list is it doesn't unlock flares as battle line. So if I replace the Infernal Courtier with a Vargulf, I'd have to take all ghouls as battle line, which I don't really want to do.
So if this was in
A blister skin.
that was
Yeah.
what I wanted to say. If this is a blister skin and you didn't have to unlock flayers as battle line, yeah, you might go from the Courtier to the Vargulf.
Yep.
But because you need the battle line, we've got to go the Courtier.
Yep.
Cool. Oh, that makes sense. I really like the Vargulf. I think it's got some good things, especially if you throw flaming weapon on it and you just run up and just smashes things. And it's not a lot of points as well, right?
Right. It's 160 points versus 130 points for the Crypt Infernal.
And if people ignore it, well, guess what? You get kicked in the groin.
And
it
can muster back anything.
Yes, that's what I love about the Vargulf is that they've got the flexibility to support the knights or the serfs.
And I actually played this yesterday. If you want a Vargulf in this list, you can use your Aborn Archregent summon to get a Vargulf in. So I had an occasion yesterday where I lost 10 ghouls in a round of combat. I brought a Vargulf in, immediately mustered back 6 ghouls.
That's good. I like that. You got your 3 units of 3 flayers. We've already talked a lot about flayers, a screaming attack. You've gone 3 as opposed to 6 because the 1-inch attacks don't lead well to going large blocks, despite what we used to do in 2B, which is like blocks of 6s and blocks of 9s. If you do 6s and 9s, it just means you're losing a lot of combat attacks and you're going to really do a lot of damage from your shooting. At least, like bringing them back would be good from 6s and 9s, but I think you lose a lot with the 1-inch.
Yep, I think so too. And then also it's a lot of points. So there are 180 points. You start getting 2, now you're at 360. Start getting 3, you're at 540. That's a lot of points to sink into one unit.
It's a big tar pit. Like if you have a big block of flayers, you're taking them not as the combat or horrors. You're doing like a really big tar pit, and you just keep bringing them back and denying them from scoring the battle tactic or the grand strategy or even scoring an objective potentially. But is it worth what a block of 9 is almost 600 points, right?
Right.
That's Marathi. Like, would you drop 600 points for like a 9? You can't even get the most of them in combat. Probably not.
And I think this army already struggles with low model count and objective control, and you start sinking that many points in one unit, you're probably going to take a Terrorgeist. That's almost 500 points right there. So now you start to if you have 2 Terrorgeists and 9 flayers, that's 3/4 of your army. There's not a lot left to move around with.
Well, that could be a non-hero Terrorgeist. That could just be a flat-out Terrorgeist, acting independently, running around just doing mortals on 6s.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
piling and attacking twice near a hero.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a no-brainer. And unfortunately, it's just that's where your damage is coming from. If you did go from Battle Regiment, you'd probably go Warlords to get yourself the extra command artifact, or you get yourself the mount trait, get yourself an extra spell, whatever it might be. We talked a little bit about, if you're going down the Terrorgeist route, maybe Alpha Beast Pack. I could see maybe like a 1-drop with Alpha, like go Battle Regiment plus. So you got 3 drops you could do. That could work.
Yep. Yeah, Alpha gives you that D6 move before the game starts, so you can get but those are only unmounted Terrorgeists or unmounted zombie dragons, so you can get them in better position, or move them over to screen or something like that. What we haven't talked about is how the new command abilities interact with Flesh Eater Courts. So I think that there's a couple of huge benefits here. So difference from 2 to 3 is now we have unit champs that can issue command abilities, which is huge, right? I think Unleash Hell is really good for a Terrorgeist, for flayers. So now you're going to be unleashing Hell, doing your bravery-based attack, and you don't roll the hits. You're not worried about the -1 to hit.
Correct. You couldn't care less.
Exactly. So that's a play. I think redeploy is very, very good with Flesh Eater Courts, especially against those god melee heroes that you don't want to be in. For example, Gotrek. Redeploy is going to be strong against Gotrek wherever, but you're able to kite, because this army is very fast. You're able to kite around certain units, and that redeploy helps a lot. Then all-out attack on any unit's really good. On flayers in particular, now you're hitting on 3s instead of 4s. That's awesome. Save stacking. You're already only at 5 up saves for most of your units. Bringing that down to 4 is huge.
And if you find that you don't need or your 2 drops in this list, but the other play could possibly be putting your flayers into Hunters of the Heartland,
Yep.
so they can't be roared at, which means that you can still use all-out attack or any command phase based command ability. That's probably one of the risks, right? You come in towards my monster, I roar at those flayers,
Yep.
they don't get unleash, they all-out attack.
Yeah, that's definitely a play too. I would probably be more inclined to do that with a larger squad of flayers if I went down that road, or a larger
And
squad of
Jonathan,
ghouls.
we've already talked about the mercenary. I think the mercenary Mega Gargant works quite nicely. It takes away points from the Terrorgeist, not necessarily the battle line. So it actually was one of the lists that Will sent me. Actually, 2 lists. I've only got one of them up here on the screen. The other one was with the Mega with the Gatebreaker, and I think it brings in the Ren, the high attacks, brings a lot of wounds in. So it's a nice little play if you want to go the Mega route.
Yeah, I ran one RTT with the Mega, Mounted Terrorgeist, Unmounted Terrorgeist, and Gristlegore, an Archregent, and then some ghouls. I think I had 2 squads of 20 ghouls and 1 squad of 10, to give you kind of that border control on those key points.
Anything you've kind of learnt from 3rd edition? Like, I know there's a couple of things when I was reading 3rd edition for the first time. I had a whole bunch of theories that I wanted to test, and there were some things that turned out the way I expected, and some things I didn't anticipate, or even some things that I over expected the impacts for. Is there anything in particular that you've kind of learned isn't as important, or is even more important with Flesh Eater Courts and 3E?
Yeah, so my big takeaway going from 2nd to 3rd with Flesh Eater Courts, 2nd edition, Flesh Eater Courts wants to be an aggressive army. It's fast. It's got good movement. It's got a lot of mortal wound output. You have opportunity to really, especially with going for that double turn, to wipe your opponent out in 1 or 2 turns. Transitioning to 3.0, it's not about killing your opponent. It's about playing to the mission, scoring those primaries, scoring your battle tactics, scoring your grand strategy. So for me, it was a big transition to try to not be that aggressive. I want to make sure I'm taking it my time, make sure I'm playing each rounds to maximize my point scoring ability. And most of the time, that doesn't mean killing your opponent. So that was a
Does
big
that
transition for me.
Does that change though when you're dealing with bow snakes, shooty orcs, shooty elves? Does that change that? Like, I actually now need to be aggressive, otherwise I'm just going to be shot off the board.
Yep. So it depends on the army that you're playing again. You really want to make sure that you understand what your opponent's does to be able to make that decision. Do I need to go straight at him, or can I afford to be cagey for a couple turns?
Yeah, yeah. I think that was the point that I wanted to make. Is that the Will isn't saying don't be aggressive in turn 1, but if you got to pick your battles. There are some things, those bow snakes are going to want to shoot you twice, and they'll take off some of those really key heroes, and they don't care about the -1s to hit, because they're just fishing for mortal wounds, and there'll be enough mortal wounds to or your Lumineth archers doing mortals on 5s from a block of 30, or you're doing big damage from those big killer bows from the Auric War clans. They'll take down a Terrorgeist a turn. Like, they'll just delete your monsters. In that case, you've got to go up. You need to engage them. You need to get rid of them quick. But in a lot of the cases, yeah, you don't want to get into combat early, because there's a lot of battle tactics that you can score early, and you just like tag the objective, start the scoring process, but start setting yourself up for turn 3 to 5.
Yeah, and against shooting lists too, you got to remember your summons. So if they deploy poorly and it's a shooting list, you can burn all your summons first turn, throw a couple units in their backfield. Then they have to shoot at those units while you're moving up the rest of your army, or ignore them, and then you're potentially locking them in combat.
Yeah, while you start controlling the middle of the board.
Right.
Anything else from 3E that you're now building around, or different thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just trying to, again, I think of Flesh Eater Courts now as that scalpel. So it's really just trying to discipline myself to be able to set up those trades really well and make good decisions about what I'm committing to and what I'm able to hold back from.
What are some of the things that you consider when you're making trades?
So I want to consider what turn it is. I want to consider what I hope to accomplish. So basically, most lists are going to have a couple big threats. You have to identify what you're not able to deal with, and then evaluate whether it's worth throwing away your key damage pieces to deal with that. The other thing I consider is, have I done my summons on my heroes yet? If I haven't, I might be a little bit more either want to do that summon, or hold them back until I can get that summon off, because that's a big chunk of your points. You have a 440 point model that's bringing in 180 points, 160 points. You want to be able to get that summon off.
Does that mean that you are more likely to go second than first just to fish that extra command point?
Yep. So I get in against every list except for really heavy shooting lists that can hit me turn one. So your Lumineth lists, I usually want to go second. So I'm able to react to the opponent and also get that chance of that double turn as well, which is huge.
Yeah, no, I can see that, because you do need the CP. You're quite hungry for the CP.
Yep.
A lot of ways to use it in your army, but how you get that is going to be challenging. And I think I could definitely see, especially going second is always a really good choice. Unless obviously you need it, right? Like this, I think my default right now is to go second, unless I see a really good use case to go first. But it takes time for you to get comfortable to give away the turn. I think most people, when they win the priority role, they want to take it because they're not comfortable with the defensive mindset of I can give it away and I'm confident that my army could survive whatever they throw at me.
Yep.
Question from Jonathan, maybe to kind of bring this home. And although James is saying that he is running a block of 6 horrors and he loves that they can re-roll failed hit rolls as well. It's not a bad little rule.
Yeah, if they're near an abhorrent hero.
But I think the question is, you're not getting all 6 in. I think that's my issue with horrors, is that it's good in theory, but you're actually really only getting in 3, maybe 4 at most.
Yeah.
But to Jonathan's last point, and we'll kind of bring things home and wrap things up, is there anything that you'd like to see in an updated Flesh Eater Cults book? Because you are probably in line. You're probably middle of the pack, maybe closer to the front.
Yeah, I mean, I think the book is still really solid. I'd like to see some War Scrolls tweaked a little bit here and there. I think we're lacking a lot of Rens, especially on those horrors, to make them viable. I think the points values are in a good spot right now. Really, it's just tweaking those War Scrolls a little bit, dealing with the attacks and the Rens. I'd like to see mortal wounds on horrors as well to make them more viable, or at least something to justify taking them, especially because you can't get more than 3 or 4 in.
I wouldn't mind seeing a rule like the Stormcast have with the Stormdrake Guard, where the dragons have a coherency of 3 inches and not 1. I wouldn't mind seeing flayers,
Yeah.
maybe not horrors, but flayers having, even if it was a 2-inch coherency as opposed to a 1-inch, spreading out a little bit. I imagine them. I don't know. That's kind of how I just imagine them.
Yeah, that'd be really nice, especially because we all have those bigger models for the horrors and flayers, so be able to get 2-inch coherency maybe.
Yeah, something like that. That's what I like. I think Flesh Eater Gods overall good. Give me more reasons to run zombie dragons, though. I do have.
Yeah.
I bought 4 start collecting boxes. I have 3 Terrorgeists and 1 zombie dragon, because back in the day when I got them in first edition, I had a battalion called the Royal Menagerie, which was based around, that was the OG Grizzlegore, Grizzlegore, and I always hated it because they were never battle line, so I still always had to fill in my ghouls as battle line, which meant I never had the right points to do what I wanted to do. But I did build the Ghoul King on Zombie Dragon for its royal blood to do some healing, and then it would support the Terrorgeists. But now it can bloody heal on itself with a heroic action. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, zombie dragon stuff. It's got the malefic hunger, which is the +1 to wound aura, which is really, really nice. But again, I just think the Terrorgeist does everything better than a zombie dragon. The one play with a zombie dragon is that with the right mount trait, you can deep strike it, which is nice to have that zombie dragon show up unexpectedly. But I think just right now we need the output from the Terrorgeist rather than the zombie dragons.
I do like the shooting attack from the zombie dragon. It's just that when I look at the trade-off between the shooting attack from the zombie dragon or the more attacks from the Terrorgeist, the Terrorgeist attacks is night and day what you want.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want to do as well, like you do a breath weapon against an opponent, then they start pulling models out that makes the charge even harder. I'm going to spend a command point to re-roll that charge, or I fail it altogether. I half the time I just hold back on the breath attacks. I just don't want to kill a model unless it's obviously a hero. Like I'm okay to kill that.
Yeah.
But
or the ways you can breath attack the thing you're not charging to.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
clear out screens, all that stuff. Yeah,
that also makes sense. But Will, I know it's quite early for you. Is there anything else you want to kind of say before we kind of bring this home? I I like what you've said. I think it's given some new ideas. I think definitely the Flayer and the Terrorgeist are definitely the stronger. I'd agree with that.
No, I really enjoy the opportunity to be able to chat with you this morning. It's been a very pleasant experience.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad. Please make sure to give me a 5-star rating on whatever food app delivery service I'm on. But
Sure.
no, look, it's been good, Will. Is there any way if people wanted to talk to you and chat lists? Are you in like a Flesh Eater Courts group? Are you on Twitter? Are you? I only know your Facebook. I'm not going to give you Facebook details around.
I'm in the Flesh Eater Courts Facebook group. I don't remember the exact group name, but I'm on there.
As I don't know, like Age of Sigmar, Flesh Eater Courts.
Eater Courts.
They're a good group. We shout out to them, and yeah, Will. All right, well,
people are welcome to message me on Facebook too.
Well, I'm not going to give you details out. You get like 100 friends requests, and if you've got a partner, they might get a bit jealous. You're like, why are you getting all these friend requests? Who are these people? What do they want? Or not? I don't know.
Yeah, she might be jealous of my time.
Right, well, we're getting a bit weird in this grand delusion. Will, absolute legend. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your Sunday. Let me know, folks, what you think about Flesh Eater Courts. How are you building it? Are you in the horrors and you like horrors, and what we've said you don't agree with? Maybe there's some secret list tech that I and Will are not looking at. Because I see right now, horrors for me, I wouldn't run them. I just wouldn't run them right now. But if there's some zombie dragon list tech as well, and you think that we are missing something, let us know. Comment section, do the thing, like, subscribe, hashtag. Will, you're a legend. Thanks for your time. Enjoy the rest of your morning. Thanks, folks, for joining in. Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more sixes.